Begin the current Daf Mesechta Yevamos Daf Tzadi Gimel. Begin 5 lines down at the top of the Yomit, where the Gemara continues the discussion from the previous Daf regarding the halacha of if someone is Bekadosh Yevama, if Kedushin is Teifus or not. Sure, is corresponds to Bekadosh in Cheskel, turning to Daf Achem, joining to today's Daf. The idea primarily that we're going to be discussing in today's Daf is the Gemara in the previous Daf discussed the Machlekes Rav and Shmuel, if Kedushin is Teifus B'Yevama or not, which would make her require a get or not, which the Gemara wanted to bring a raya from a Mishnah Mesechta Kedushin. The Mishnah said, if someone says to a woman that you are Mukadeshes to me, after I convert, after you convert, after I get freed from being a slave, after you get freed from being a slave, after your husband died, after your sister dies, or after that your Yavam does chalitza to you, the halacha is that she's not going to be Mukadeshes. So says Rabbi Yochanan, you see a clear ayah from a Mishnah Mesechta Kedushin to this halacha that if someone did Kedushin to a Shemeres Yavam, to a Yevama, the Kedushin would not be Teifus. And therefore, we're saying that the halacha is that it's not going to take effect because it's something that you can't do right now. So, on that, Rish Lakish said no. Possibly, I could tell you that this Mishnah is like Rabbi Kiva, who holds Kedushin is not Teifus b'chiyav alav. Yevama l'shuk is a chiyav alav, a negative prohibition. That's why Kedushin is not Teifus. But according to the Rabbanu who disagree and hold Kedushin is Teifus and chiyav alav, I would say the same thing would apply to Yevama. You wouldn't have a raya. Could be Kedushin is Teifus in the Yevama, which the Gemara had asked, and this is on the bottom of Sali Bezim Abayz. Wait a second. If you explain the Mishnah Kedushin like Rabbi Kiva, then why, if you say that I'm giving you the Kedushin now, that should take effect when after you get chalitza from your Yavam? Why wouldn't it work? Kedushin should be Teifus because we know Rabbi Kiva holds that Adam could be makna davar shabbat ha'olam. You could make a kinyan on something that's not yet around in the world. Where do we find that? A Mishnah in the Dharm, which is on the top of this Amid, that if, let's say, a woman says to her husband, I'm taking a neder that what I do for you, you can't have hanaf from. So Tanakama says he doesn't have to do hafaras in the Dharm because a woman is obligated to her husband. Kiva says no, he should do hafaras in the Dharm because she might make more than what she has to give him. And it's regarding that we're saying that he has to be made for that neder. But wait a second, that food is not there yet. Whatever she earned is not there yet. How is she making it usher on her husband? You see that a person can make a isser or a kinyan on something that's labeled oilam. So Rabbi Kiva holds that a kinyan, it could even be a davar labeled oilam. So why, if the Mishnah in Kedushin like Rabbi Kiva, are you telling me that when he says la'achar sheyichlis la'chivimech is not mukadeshes, she should be mukadeshes right now because you can make a kinyan on davar labeled oilam? So the Gemara had answered. That's where we left off. That it was explained that halacha of Rabbi Kiva was when the woman said, not that she's sanctifying, she's making a neder on her earnings. She was making a neder on her hands further earnings, which the Yadayim are here. That's not a davar shalei, it is bol olam, and therefore that's what Rabbi Kiva says, you have to be made for it. But really Rabbi Kiva holds that you cannot be marked, no make yes on davar shalei bol olam. And that's why you could say that the Mishnah Mesechta Kedushin is like Rabbi Kiva. That's where the Gemara left off. And that's what we continue when we say that this idea that we're explaining that according to Rabbi Kiva, a person cannot be makna, cannot make a kinyan or isra on something that did not come to the world yet, and therefore we're saying that that's why the Mishnah and Kedusha could be like him. That's what plika did Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. That disagrees with Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. Because Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, he says a whole long list of opinions that hold that a person could be makna davar shalei b'lo olam. And one of them is Rabbi Kiva, which obviously disagrees with the premise of explaining the Mishnah Kedushin like Rish Lakish wanted to reject, to say like Rabbi Kiva, that would have to be explained that you cannot be marked in the davar shalei b'lo olam. Rav Nachman basically disagrees. Because he said Rav Huna is Karav. In other words, Rav Huna received this halacha from his teacher Rav, and Rav Karabiyanai. Rav received it from Rabbi Yanai, and like Rashi explains, all of them, one above the other from the previous generation, they received this halacha. Rabbi Yanai Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Chia Karebi, V'Rebbi Karemeya, V'Remeya Karebi Lezben Yaakov, Rabbi Lezben Yaakov is Karebi Kiva, that each one of them in this whole Hishtalshalis, in this whole Messiah, they all hold the Amar Adam Makne Davar shalei b'lo olam. A person could make a kinyan on something that has not yet come to the world. And again, therefore, obviously that disagrees with Rav Huna ben Yeshua, who he was explaining to Rabbi Kiva that holds you have to make a hafar in the dharma, and what the woman says her earnings can be us or the husband, that would be a kinyan. He wanted to say that's only because her hands are here. But if her shlei would not work, that's not like Rabbi Nachman who quotes Rabbi Kiva clearly, as we're going to see on the Beis, as we go through the list of all these different opinions, that no, you could do it even on shlei b'la'olam. So the Gemara explains, starting from the bottom. Rav Huna, he was the last one. Where do you see that he holds that a person can be marked in the davar shlei b'la'olam? So I think what we learned as follows. If someone sells the fruits of a palm tree to his friend during the winter months, meaning it's not there yet, so he explains, if it has not yet come out the fruits, meaning if the person wants to retract before the months of Nisan, where then all the trees bring out the fruits, so then you could back out, because it didn't come to the world yet. Once it came to the world, you can't back out anymore, because once they come, the sale takes effect. What do you mean take effect? I made the kinyan in the winter months when the payers weren't here. Because obviously Reb Huna holds that a person could be maked in davar shlei b'la'olam. You just have to wait till it actually comes out. But the kinyan could be even when it was shlei b'la'olam. Rav Nachman Namar, and Rav Nachman, he says that no, he disagrees. He says af mishabol la'olam yachal achzboy. As Taisa points out, he holds the exact opposite of Rav Huna. He said even when it comes out to the world, you could be chayzer, because like Rashi elsewhere explains, that a person cannot be back from davar shlei b'la'olam. So therefore, he holds that you could back out. Now, Amar Rav Nachman says, Medina, I agree, but if let's say the buyer grabs it and eats it, then lo mafkinim mineh. Then you cannot remove it from him. Why would that be? So Rashi in Bava Metzia explains, because as long as the seller didn't back out, he was moichel on the consumption. And even though it was an error, where he didn't know that he could back out, still it's a mechila. Because the seller thinks that it is acquired by the consumer, and that he rightfully is eating the payers, and therefore he's moichel on the eating. So therefore even Rav Nachman says he would agree, if the buyer grabs it and eats it, that you wouldn't remove it from it. Okay, that was Rav Huna. Now moving further up, the Rebbe of Rav Huna was Rav. Rav, where do we find he holds this halacha of other makinish davar shlei b'la'olam? It's called Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna, who we said he got this tradition, he said this over from our teacher Rav. Someone says to his friend, before the guy ever bought the field, he says, Sada zu shani lekech. This field I'm going to buy, when I'm going to buy it, it's acquired to you from now. Kana, that guy has already bought it, and it was gifted to him. So obviously, that we see that Rav Huna had learned this from Rav, where we see that a person can be maked in davar shlei b'la'olam. He's selling something he never even bought. So therefore you see that Rav also held that a person can be maked in davar shlei b'la'olam. Going further up, Rabbi Yanai, who is one of those, is Reb Chia, which is, because we have both of them in the story, where we see that those two generations also held like this halacha. Because Rabbi Yanai had a larisa. Rabbi Yanai had a sharecropper. That if a maisele come to the peri, his sharecropper used to bring him a basket of fruits, komali shops every Arab shops, every Friday. One Friday, it was getting late, and he was delaying, but they didn't come. So what did Rabbi Yanai do? Shokal, he went, aser miperi de beis alayu. He went and he had to be tithe the produce before Shabbos. So he went and he took maestras from the fruits of his house on that fruits. Tracy explains this was actually the sharecropper's fruits, and he went and he took meiser on the fruits which the sharecropper was going to end up giving to him, even though he didn't even come yet. Now, Asla Kamed Reb Chia, who again that's a generation before, and then Malay said to him, Shabbat about you did very well, because the Tanya Lina Bryson, Pasuk says in the Var.
Doesn't they have to give me a mukaf?
Oh yes, so Taisa discusses that actually, regarding the halacha of Minamukav, and regarding this question of, as we'll see in the Beis, regarding taking it Arab Shabbos versus the Shabbos, if you could take it and separate. But yeah, that's a good point. But Taisa discusses if it's there or not there, what the leniencies are that we have. So he says that we learn in the Brisa that the pasuk says that you should eat in front of Hashem your God in the place that He chose to rest His name over there, the meiser of your grain and your tirush and your yitzar, and the purpose is laman tilmad leyiras Hashem lekecha kol yom, so that you should learn to fear Hashem your God all the days. Now, what does it mean, all the days? Elo Shabbos b'Yom Tov. This is Shabbos and Yom Tov, meaning a person should be careful to learn that not to nullify Oynik Shabbos because of rectifying Tevel. That's what the limud from the pasuk is, that you should have the meiser, your trumas and meisers, kol yomim, that make sure you have it even on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So says the Gemara, L'mai Hilchasa. What's the pasuk coming to warn the person to make sure that he has trumas and meisers on Shabbos and Yom Tov? If you think it's regarding taking meiser on Shabbos, umeichel, and that you could eat on Shabbos and Yom Tov. In other words, and you need the pasuk to tell you, even though it's Shabbos, you could still fix it. Says the Gemara, obviously, Itzrach krola mishri tiltal d'rabbanan. You think we need a pasuk to permit you for a rabbinic halacha of moving? Meaning, the halacha of separating meiser on Shabbos, although we know you're not allowed to separate trumas and meisers, it's only rabbinic. As we learned in the Mishnah, Elohim Mishum Shmuz, and the Mishnah Mesechus Beis Daf Yomi says, "Lo make being trumas and meisers." It's not really biblically forbidden, but it's rabbinically, it's like fixing. Now, where does the pasuk come to say that the rabbinicus is forbidden, that you would need a pasuk to permit it? In other words, that can't be what the pasuk is coming to tell you, that to be careful to make sure that you have your trumas and meisers on Shabbos, to tell me that I can separate trumas and meisers on Shabbos, because versteht sich, it's not biblically forbidden. I don't need a pasuk to permit it. So rather, as we continue to the base, lav, obviously, it's ki haigavna. What do you mean ki haigavna? That you're allowed to take off meiser erev Shabbos on what has not yet even come to the world that it's going to come, because l'tzayrich einik Shabbos. That's how Rashi explains, which Tosfos finds that difficult. That what's the difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov in other days? And Tosfos says, like you were asking, Tosfos says that the chiddush of the pasuk is coming to tell you that shaloi min hamukif. Meaning, it's even though it's loy min hamukif that we generally say that's forbidden, the pasuk is coming to tell you that kol hayom, to tell you this heter of to do it even shaloi min hamukif, which then Tosfos is difficult. He says, wait a second, since midiraisa you're allowed to take Truma Shabbos, and how are you allowed to do shaloi min hamukif? So Tosfos explains different cases why you're not going to be able to get it and access it. But upon them, that's Rashi says that the chiddush is that you're allowed to do it shaloi b'la olam, and Tosfos the chiddush is that shaloi min hamukif. But one thing that we see here, in Al-Kapanim, that it is a davar shalei b'la olam, and we see Reb Chia and Reb Yanai both holding of this halacha, which we're going through this hishtalshlus of the opinions that shalei b'la olam you can make a kinyan on. Now Amalei, so Reb Yanai said to Reb Chia, but they recited to me in my dream on this Friday night, Kana rotzitz, the crushed reed. So says Rabbi Yana, my love hachi kamerli, isn't this what they're telling me, as it says in Pasuk in Lochem Beis? Sancheriv said to Chizkiah HaMelech, Hine betachto locha, behold that you're confident, on meshenes, on leaning on hakana harotzitz hazeh, on this crushed reed, which was referring that you're relying on the Egyptian king. Basically, the illusion is that you're not doing something appropriate. It's not going to work for you. Isn't that why they were reading to me in my dream, Kana Ratzitz? So isn't it something bad that I did, that I went and I took off for something Shaloi B'la Olam or Shaloi B'la Mukah? Says Reb Chia, no. What they were saying to you is a pasuk in Yeshaya. Oftentimes it's in your interpretation of what the dreams are. Kana Ratzitz lo yishbar. The crushed reed will not break. Ufishtar keya, and the flax is flickering, loy chavena, it's not going to be extinguished. In other words, to the contrary, like the end of the pasuk says, la'emes yitzi mishpat, and to the truth, the judgment is going to come out. That's referring to Mashiach. In other words, that you did do appropriate. So basically, Reb Chia was saying that no, you're allowed to go ahead and be makna, and to take the meises and trumas on davar shalei b'la olam, even though he didn't even get it yet, it wasn't even his. That's okay. So again, we see that they also held of this concept. Going further up, Rebbe, the Tanakh Lina Brisa, Pasuk says in Devarim, "Lisaskir eved al adayna." It's not clear what that pasuk means. Saskir is like to quarantine, to lock up. Don't lock up a servant to his master. What does that mean? So Rebbe, his interpretation is, "B'lekich eved," if you purchase a slave, almanas l'shafaroi, with the intention of freeing him, that's Akasim Adaber. So what the Torah is warning you is, if you originally bought the slave, not meaning that you're going to free him, so you're forewarned of not to go ahead and do service with him and use him as a slave. So says the Mahechad, then what's the case talking about? So he says the Chasam, where he writes to the slave, he writes, when I'm going to buy you, you are bought for yourself. So now we see that Rebbe held that's Leisaski Eved Al-Dernav, that a person could be makna to the Eved, the Eved that he never even bought yet. Even though Shalei B'Lo Olam, you can be makna him. So again, you see he holds the same thing. You can makna to Shalei Olam. Further up, Reb Meir, Ditnan, which is actually a brisa. If someone says to a woman, this is similar to what we brought on the end of the previous daf. Someone says to a woman that you are engaged to me, after I convert, after you convert, meaning now that we're not Jewish, you can't go ahead and obviously have a kedushin, but after either one of us converts, after I'll be freed, after that you're freed from being a slave, now you're married, but after your husband dies, then the kedushin will take effect, or your sister, that's my wife, after she dies, or after that you're waiting for Yibum, after your Yevamos does chalitza to you. In Mukadesh says the Tanakama, she's not going to be engaged. The Meir Mukadesh, says she's going to be engaged. So you see, Meir holds, even though it's a double shalei b'lo olam, you're giving kedushin to a woman that's not able to have kedushin. Even so, the halach is going to be that it's going to take effect. Lesben Yaakov, the Tanya, like we learned in the Brisa. The Brisa is talking about that you're taking truma from detached produce on attached produce. Now, if he says regarding the future, the reason why that's going to take effect is because it's bi'adai, meaning you have the ability to detach the attached produce. So the detached could be used as trumas and meisters on the attached. However, Yashar came number more than this Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says. Afila mama, even if he says Pedis Adu Gazut Solution, the produce of this row that's detached. Truma Pedis Adu Gazut should be truma on the produce of this row which is attached, or you go the other way around. Pedis Adu Gazut, the produce, the fruits of this row which is attached, should be trumas al Pedis Solution on the fruits of this one which is detached. And even more than this, that it's not even a third of it matured yet, but that when it's going to be a third of it matured and then it's going to be detached, which when it ripens a third, that's considered gemar malacha. As the Gemara says, Rishon up Gimel, Ba'asa says Hatikul l'shalish, Hatikul l'shalish el l'shlish. That's when it's considered a gemar pri, and the haviyu shlish v'nit lishur. Then it finally matures a third and it gets detached. Then Devarv Kayam, and his words are valid. So you see from that halacha of Lesben Yaakov that even the Shalei B'Lo Olam, it's not even yet a Gemar Pri, but you're saying so that when it's going to be a Gemar Pri, then it's going to take effect. It's going to take effect then. Obviously, you could make a kinyan. You could take it over your Trumas Amaisa Davar Shalei B'Lo Olam. And finally, the top one, Rabbi Kiva, going all the way that far back, which is the point of this whole discussion, really, to show us Rabbi Kiva also holds that you can be Makan Davar Shalei Olam, which is not like the way the Gemara was learning Rabbi Kiva from the previous daf. Is it's not. They go to the Mishnah Masechta Siddur, which is this teaching, which is a different interpretation. Rabbi Kiva says, the Machlekes, the Tanakama says, if a wife says, I'm taking a neder, whatever I do is going to be forbidden for your mouth, in Tzarech Lav, the Tanakama says, you don't do it for us because the woman is Meshubah to her husband. Kiva says, no, you have to nullify the vow. She might go ahead and do more than what's fit for him. So you see that the way that Rav Nachman Yitzchak learns Rabbi Kiva in this Mishnah, in the Darim, is not like the way Rav Huna Beredi B'Shua learns it. Rabbi B'Shua was learning up Alamdis that no, of course according to Rabbi Kiva, you wouldn't have to nullify the vow even if she makes more than what she's indebted to the husband. The reason why is because she's sanctifying her hands for the handiwork, and the hands are here Ba'al Olam. So on that is what he says, that the Gemara says that Nach Mitzvah doesn't learn like that, because he's going through this whole evolution of who held like this, that you could be Machshel from Olam, and who's on the top of this ladder is Rabbi Kiva. That he's saying that you have to be Mefer. Obviously he's learning it's not in the Yadayim, it's even in the Maisi Yadayim, that even that, Rabbi Kiva holds that you can be Machshel, and that, so we have Machlekes again, and that would depend if Rish Lakish was able to reject Rabbi Yechanan's teaching to show that even the Chacham hold that Yibum that if these kedushin tevis in the Yevama, Yechon wanted to show Mishnah kedushin that you see that it's not, and that Rosh Hashanah says no, it's not. It's not going to Rabban. It's going to Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva holds that any chiva lavin kedushin not teifas, and Yevama l'shok is chiva lavin. But then the problem was, why did he hold the alacha sheyechlitz that the kedushin not going to be teifas? So the Gemara wants to say, because he holds he cannot be makar b'shlo, and then we have to reinterpret the Mishnah Nedarim according to where Rav Nachman Yitzchak holds. You can't say it's like Rabbi Kiva definitely would be a raya to Rabbi Yochanan and Rav that a person could that did not be kedushin teifas and Yevama l'shok even according to the Rabban. That finishes off the discussion from the previous topic. Now the Gemara continues regarding this halacha of our Mishnah of Nisas al Piyei Echad, which that's the theme of these Mishnayos in the Isha Rabbah, regarding if a woman gets remarried based on the testimony of either two witnesses or one witness. So the Gemara goes back to that theme of getting married with one aid. So it says the Gemara the following question: that's from Rav Sheshis. Aid echad b'Yevama. If a single witness testifies that the woman's husband died, so that now she's going to be able to do yibum. It's not regular. I mean, we were talking about that there's halacha because of iguna, but the halacha is that the woman could remarry based on one witness. But let's say she's not going to remarry. Let's say now that we know the husband's dead, she's going to do yibum. What's the halacha? So what's the Gemara's question? So the Gemara explains. Today's discusses why we're having this clear only over here. Up until now, we always presumed it's one of these reasons. So it says the Gemara, time of the Eidecha, what's the reason of the halacha of one witness that we allow the woman to get remarried? Because something that's going to ultimately be revealed. Loi Meshaker, the Eidecha wouldn't lie. Obviously, if the husband's alive and he's going to come back 3 weeks later, a person wouldn't make such a lie. So here also, he's not going to lie to allow her to marry his brother. So therefore, we would rely on the Eidecha. Like maybe no. Time of the Eidecha, what's the reason of the one witness that we believe in? Because we said the woman's going to be precise and she's going to be careful, she'll check out to verify the facts, and therefore she's going to get married. But here, since there's sometimes she really likes her brother-in-law, she's not going to be so careful and she's going to get married to her brother-in-law. Maybe we're not going to rely on the Eid Echad because the principle of the Eid Echad is Daika Mitzvah, and here she's not going to be so careful because she's really looking forward to get married to her brother-in-law. So Rav Shesha says to Nisua. He says, let's bring a raya from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, if they said to a woman, Meis bincha v'achakach meis balacha. They said the order what happened was that first your son died, then your husband died. Which means to say that at the time of the death there was no children. So therefore, when this happened, she went and she did the achakach, and then they came and told us, sorry, it's actually chiluf to him. It's actually the other way around. First your husband died, and then the son, which means to say that there was no mitzvah. So Teisei, she has to leave. And the child, the first one and the last one, the mamzerim, because any child she has from this brother-in-law is a chiva krisis, because the eshash ach sheish lebanim, so to speak, meaning to say that the husband was alive, which is a chiva of kars. That's what the Mishnah says. Says, wait a second. Hey, what's the case talking about? In other words, if you tell me that the woman got married to the yavam, because two witnesses said the husband died, and then two other witnesses came along and said, sorry, it was the opposite. Why are you relying on the second two witnesses? Rely on the first two. How do you know what this last two are saying are true? That you're going to say the children of mamzerim and she has to leave. More of a mamzer? Some of the children of mamzerim, safek mamzer. It's a safek mamzer, which Tosh actually explains when the Gemara is asking why you're relying on the second two, maybe relying on the first two. He says, okay, wait a second, that's called trey. That's a safek d'Rabbanan. So you would obviously say that you would remain with the cheskes isra to the yavam because you had a chazaka. What's the Gemara saying that say trey? So the Rebbe says it's talking about where the yavam says barley and she says bari. Then we shouldn't have said teitzei, just like when we say nisis le'echad me'edeha in the beginning of the parak. So therefore, that's what the Gemara is saying. It's trey. Why are you going to say that she has to leave? She should be able to stay. And additionally, how can you say it's a mamzer? It's a safek mamzer. And if you're going to say loidak, if you're going to say that really the Tana wasn't precise in his words, and when he said that it's a mamzer, you're right, it didn't mean a definitive mamzer because it's a safek mamzer, it's trey. I'm the Tani Sefer, but later on the Mishnah says regarding a different case, we said harishin mamzer. The first one is going to be a mamzer because that's definite. Because we're talking about where she got married with one aid and then she was rejected by two witnesses who said no, that was not the case. The last one's not a mamzer. Obviously, we're being precise because we're saying what's not a mamzer. We're saying the first one is a definitive mamzer. So don't give me an answer saying that it's trey when we're saying that the child's a mamzer, safek mamzer, because we see that mamzer means definitive mamzer. Obviously, we could bring a raya that the yibum was through chat. Obviously, you got married with one witness. Now you have two witnesses who are saying it's the opposite. Okay, two is going to trump one. But what we could infer from that is, but the time it doesn't be chashur. But it's only because two witnesses come and reject that eid echad. That's why we say that she has to leave him and the children mamzer. But if not for that, we would see from the Mishnah that we would believe that eid echad even for the halacha of marrying the yavam. Again, our Mishnah is telling us that Teitzei means she has to leave because it turns out it was wrong. The one aid was rejected by two witnesses, but you see, if not for the later two witnesses, we would rely on one aid. So we see that answers our question. We weren't sure. Maybe she not be daika mitzvah because she loves her brother-in-law. Now we see we do rely on eid echad. Now that's one version. Vikidami, that those that say a different version. No, Allah Tabaylah. This is no question that an eid echad is for sure believed to do yibum because I feel like mehemna. She herself is also believed for the same thing. For sure, we're going to believe eid echad. Why? Is it not? We're going to Mishnah later on that Kuvidalim and base. Mishnah says that Isha Shama Meis Bali. If a woman says that my husband died, so Tinase she could get married if let's say there's no mitzvah of yibum over here. Now let's say she says Meis Bali, she could also be Tisyabim. She could do yibum. So if the woman is believed, for sure the eid echad, which really is the foundation of a woman being believed, for sure that's going to work. The whole question was Lemishra Yevamos Alma. The other way around. Let's say you have an eid echad saying that she's permitted to marry other people, meaning the eid echad tells her that your yavam died, or your husband died, and then your son died. So in other words, the eid echad is explicitly coming to tell her that you don't have, meaning up until now we presume she had a mitzvah yibum. And the eid echad is telling her, no, you don't have a mitzvah yibum. Either because your yavam died, or because first your husband died, then your son died. So as Taish explained, the reason why we're having the question over here is because we presume that the woman hates her brother-in-law more than she likes him. And if that's the case, so therefore we're saying, even though we know regarding liking the brother-in-law, we say we're not concerned over there, but maybe regarding hating, then we would be concerned, then maybe we wouldn't believe the eid echad. As the Gemara explains. My time of the eid echad, what's the reason of the eid echad? That we rely on him when, let's say, to allow a woman to get remarried, something's going to have to be revealed. He's not going to lie, so we rely on the eid echad. So he's not going to lie to say the husband died or that the husband died first and the son, and therefore we rely on the eid echad. No, maybe the reason the eid echad is from the daika mitzvah because she's precise and she gets married. But whole daika mitzvah here, she's not going to be careful to get married because the misno who, as we continue to talk about Dalman Aleph, disanulate. She hates the young. So although we already answered, like we said, regarding liking, we're not concerned because she doesn't like him so much. That's not going to cause her to go and get married without being precise. But for hating. So she's going to run to go marry someone else because she hates the brother-in-law, the shvuga, and therefore maybe there we would be concerned and we wouldn't rely on the eid echad. So now Rav Sheshes says to this to again bring a raya from the halacha of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said Amar Lov. They said to her the other way around now. Meis balecha. We said that if they tell her your husband died, va'achach meis bincha, and then your son died, meaning to say that there is no mitzvah yibum because your son was alive. He died a few moments later in the car accident after the husband. So, Vinissa, she got married to someone else. Then they tell us, sorry, is the exact opposite. Means that there was a mitzvah yibum, you were not allowed to marry someone else. So, Teisesh has to leave the marriage of that other person. And the children of the first and the second are mamzer, which is Rashi points out, that's like Rabbi Kiva, because the Yevamos is a chiva lavin. This man that she married is negative prohibition, and Rabbi Kiva holds that also would create mamzer. But it says wait a second, what's the case talking about? If we're talking about that the Eidim who originally came were two, and then the Eidim who rejected were also two. What do you, as we said this in the first version, what are you relying on the second one? Rely on the first one, like Taisa explained, when she says barili, and therefore then you don't necessarily remove her from the marriage. Moreover, mamzer, children mamzerim, savi mamzer, it's a suffix. You have two against two. You don't know definitively that's a mamzer. And mechitim leidok, again the same type of terminology. If you're going to say maybe the Mishnah is not precise, maybe when it says mamzer really means savi mamzer. How could you say that? Niktani say from the fact that the Sefer says a rishon mamzer ba'achron ein mamzer, which again that means a definitive mamzer. Obviously it's definitive, not savi. Allah, rather, obviously, okay, it can't be 2 against 2, because then the halacha wouldn't make sense. Rather, it must be that the original one who allowed her to get married l'shuk was 1 witness. Okay, so what you see from the Mishnah is with time of the Asubei Trak Chashu, it's only because you have 2 witnesses who are refuting that Eid Echad, so therefore she has to leave that marriage of that person that she married, l'shuk, and again the children are going to be mamzein. Halav hachim. But you see, if not for the 2 witnesses subsequently coming, that you would rely on that Eid Echad to marry l'shuk. So you see, even regarding hating the brother-in-law, which is to marry someone else, you see that we rely on Eid Echad. Says Gemara, no, it's not a raya. Lo'ilam trey or trey. You could say that actually what allowed her originally to get remarried was 2 witnesses, not 1 witness. And so how do we understand, if that's the case, why do we rely on the second pair of witnesses over the first one? The second pair of witnesses did hazama to the first pair, that they didn't just reject what they're saying, they said, you are with us. The Torah believes in that case, the second pair of witnesses, as the pasuk says in the Bram Yates, which that's talking about where you say imana, you with us. The Gemara says here also it's talking about where it's with Eidei Hazama, and therefore there's no raya to say that you believe Eid Echad to make Torah to permit the woman l'shuk, because here we're not talking about with Eid Echad, we're talking about with 2 witnesses. The only reason why we didn't want to say that case is because we said, okay, my chazas, why are you relying on the second one more than the first one? When it comes to Allah Vazam, we rely on the second pair more than the first one, and that's why it's going to refute the first one. That's what Teitzim Zemezeh. We don't have a right that with Eid Echad that you're permitted to marry l'shuk. Bring it to any time.